Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Wednesday, September 17th, 2025. Time to get this rolling one more time. I missed the opportunity yesterday. I think I may have gotten an alert about it of sorts from social media, people who are, weird and see these things. But I missed a chance yesterday to note the weird date, and I should have had you out buying lottery tickets so that you could then, of course, support the show at patreon.com/KagroX. Okay, we'll tell you about that later on, I'm sure, in spectacular fashion. I really absolutely must sit down and record you some new messages about that, I know. Any rate, yesterday's date, 9 for September, the way we write our dates, 9/16/25. Mathematicians and the like and other weird nerds probably noticed, maybe really didn't, but some small percentage of them noticed that was a series of perfect squares there. 9 being 3 squared, 16, 4, and 25, 5. 3, 4, 5, not a frequent combination. We'll see it again in about 100 years. But it won't be as special. One, because either we'll all be brains in jars or we'll be dead, for one thing. But for another, as it turns out, well, let's see. First of all, the 3, 4, 5 progression is a Pythagorean right triangle measurement. I don't know what the hell you would call it. I don't know that this thing is anything. But somebody did point out that I guess that would be You could, it was Pythagorean in some way, and I know only one thing about Pythagoras, him and right triangle. So I assume that those would be the measurements of the sides of a right triangle. 3, 4, 5 would work out just fine. But also somebody else pointed out that this century's 3, 4, 5 is 2025, and at 2025, if it bothers you, well, it's just a cheap trick because the date isn't really, the year isn't 25, the year is 2025. Well, it's not quite as exciting because it isn't 5 squared, but 2025 is 45 squared. So every part of that date was a perfect square. Of course, if you are writing your dates European style, well, then it's out of order, but it could still be Pythagorean, I suppose. Anyway, there you have it. That is a thing that happened yesterday, and it will impact your life not at all, particularly because you missed it. But anyway, I just thought I would mention it because I like that kind of stuff in the abstract sense. Someone told me that, and I said, hey, that's cool. Not I like that stuff. Like I sit down and analyze the dates and try to find fun things. All right. Where to start today? Golly, I don't know. I got a lot of catching up to do. We're not going to be able to have a visit with Greg this morning because of home improvement. There was so much improvement going on at his home, and I don't mean his national home because there's not a lot of improvement going on there, but I mean his individually owned home, which Bill Pulte is looking into right now to see whether he claimed it as a vacation home or not, even though I don't know what he'd be taking a vacation from. In that home, no, that's kind of where he spends his time. Anyway, too much, I don't know, banging and clanging and sawing and who knows what goes into this kind of home improvement. I do not know, but apparently it just would be too much, even for Abby. And so we're on our own today. We'll see about how tomorrow goes. Maybe the house will be completely improved by tomorrow, and it'll be a palace. And then there won't be anything else you could possibly want to do to this thing for the next several generations, and then his participation won't be interrupted. Anyway, there's plenty to catch up on anyway. Really, it's kind of good news in a way if you want to try to find a silver lining to it. We have so many stories to get to. I don't know or so many stories that we need to get to in depth that we could go either direction here in a way that we might find ourselves constrained with if we had less time to operate. This would ordinarily be the Friday show. Now, Friday, we can really catch up. Plus, I guess I really ought to start getting ready for next Tuesday, Jewish holidays coming up. There's going to be some missed microphone time, which I guess I can spend time after these shows trying to make up for you later on, because there's plenty to get to. I'll start with this, even though I guess this wouldn't be the top most important news. It's not the most frantically reported piece of information, but we'll turn back and update a few stories which have been important to us, let's say, and give you the latest updates. One, we mentioned to you yesterday, I finally got this story on the air, that as it turns out, when they actually looked at the paperwork, which is something that the Trump administration hates to do, for Lisa Cook's mortgages, and this becomes a bigger story as we approach the Fed's Board of Governors meeting, which I think is slated for Friday, or no, wasn't it yesterday, actually? Friday is the meeting of the Weirdo Vaccine Council, that's WVC, where they're expected to try and make it the government position that everybody should get measles, I guess. And I've been watching people kind of freak out about the idea and whether or not it's a good idea to rush out and get your COVID booster or various other vaccine boosters. That's the weird thing. Everyone's gotten used to getting out there for their COVID boosters, but now people are saying, it's been 50 years since I was inoculated against measles and it's coming back. What's the effectiveness of my vaccination at this stage of the game? It was never something you had to worry about because there just wasn't any measles really to speak of in circulation. And so, you could let it ride. But now, let's say probably Robert Redford didn't get himself a maybe he did, I don't know. But he figured, okay, in the time I've got left before I go, is measles going to catch up with me? Probably not. And he was a very wise man. So you could take your cue from him, but now you can't. So lots of people also making their way out to get boosters of immunizations that they figured they had taken care of and would never have to worry about again. But COVID, we're used to because in 2019 it was a novel coronavirus. Now it's commonplace. But everybody knows that you should be getting those updated boosters. Even the people who are against them know that you should be getting them, but they choose to lie to you instead. And the question is, will Friday before the meeting, I guess, be your last chance to go and grab them? I did see news yesterday that the health insurance industry group, I guess, AHIP, and I'm not even certain who they are, and we could look them up and find their press release and everything so that we could prove it to you that it's the case. Were they on Blue Sky? I guess I could look for that post too. What's AHIP? Are they going to tell me at some point what it stands for? Or do I have to go to a Wikipedia page about it? Is that what I need to do? When people also ask, what does AHIP stand for? AI. What do you think? And AI tells me it's for the America's Health Insurance Plans. I think that's leading to a page from AHIP, and so I assume it's not AI slop. Anyway, they seem to have taken the position that America's insurance coverage folks, I don't know who they represent exactly, but at any rate, that they will continue to cover, well, I don't know what vaccines. I know they said the COVID vaccine, but I assume most of the other previously normally approved ones likewise will be covered by insurance, but I guess that's largely going to be private insurance. And I suppose for most of the people who depend on government run or government well, everybody's got government subsidized insurance now, but you know what I mean. More governmental programs can Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his band of weirdos use the levers in the federal government to make it more difficult to get these vaccinations? Probably. Though if you're dependent on government healthcare, I don't know how much flexibility you have to run out and get these boosters. But I guess if you're on a private healthcare plan through employers, or you're self-employed, or you're a fabulous billionaire or something like that, you could probably rely on the insurance coverage keeping these things available. Here's the story of it. There was a press release, and it was widely circulated by Dr. Vin Gupta. Dr. Vin Gupta, you may recognize from long public affiliation with NBC News, the NBC News, an MSNBC medical analyst, and various other, affiliations. But that'd be probably the one you recognize him from. But Vin Gupta circulating this statement from AHIP with his own commentary. Regardless of the disgraceful nonsense we will likely hear from this administration in the coming days on vaccine, quote, recommendations, America's healthcare insurers issued a joint statement tonight saying coverage for COVID and flu shots, that's the answer, will remain unchanged from prior years. Gosh, I hope that will also cover diseases we thought we had eradicated. So there you go. AHIP released the following statement today regarding vaccine coverage. It's not that long. Health plans are committed to maintaining and ensuring affordable access to vaccines, or at least these two. Health plan coverage decisions for immunizations are grounded in each plan's ongoing rigorous review of scientific and clinical evidence. We're supposed to, understand that they still do this. I hope it's the case. And continual evaluation of multiple sources of data. Health plans will continue to cover all ACIP recommended immunizations that were recommended as of September 1st, 2025, including updated formulations of the COVID-19 and influenza vaccines with no cost sharing for patients through the end of 2026. So they're only kind of committing to the no cost sharing thing for another year, but take it while you can get it. And I mean it. Go and take it. In fact, Greg's, supposedly not here, but we have this statement issued by the Greg Dworkin Institute of always having recorded bits on hand, even if he's not available that day. I don't know what the acronym on that one is. Someone can work that one out. Greg, please.
Oh my fucking God, get the fucking vaccine already, you fucking fucks.
Yeah, there you go. I don't think it could be made any clearer unless we got rid of those little bleeps. But, the bleeps are what makes it fun. All right. Well, that wasn't supposed to be my number one issue of the day. What was supposed to be my number one issue of the day is also something that wasn't supposed to be my number one issue for the day until about 5 minutes before the show. I happened to see Jason Leopold, who, we read fairly frequently around here, passing on this story from colleagues of his. He's at Bloomberg, isn't he? I guess I got to click on everybody's profile these days to find out where they are. People move around so often. That's actually one of my favorite things about the social media scene is that these reporters, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing in their minds when they move around from job to job, whichever it is at least you can find them if you're following them on social media and continue to get their stories. And you might even not have to know where they work for. You just click the links. Okay. Let's see. There's another update on this story. So I'm going to open this one up on the side. But I'll tell you what Jason Leopold was talking about. Jason Leopold was saying that there was a new scoop story by his colleagues at Bloomberg News about the Lisa Cook story. So I was curious, what that might be. And, I don't think Jason Leopold is involved in this story, so you don't have to get upset about him. But you can get upset about the Bloomberg headline writers, I guess. And there's a lack of clarity here in this story. Do we get to read this whole story? Ready for this headline? It's about Scott Bessent or Besant, depending on who you think you're taking your pronunciation cues for. I should look up some interviews with him on the assumption that he tells the interviewers how to pronounce his name. Although no, people might not even ask; they might just assume it's Besant. Isn't he? So it was Justin Wolfers, I think, who's right about everything else, but who says Besant, which I find unlikely. Anyway. I'm doing it anyway. Besant, like Fed governor, made contradictory mortgage pledges. So two things about that one. Besant Besant made contradictory mortgage pledges. Oh my God. And like Fed governor? Oh no. But we learned yesterday that the Fed governor didn't make contradictory mortgage pledges. But there it is in the headline. Now you might think, well, what they mean is, as Anthony Cormier and Zachary R. Mider, M-I-D-E-R, report just today, you might think that they were just saying, well, it's the same issue, even though it turned out not to be the case with Lisa Cook, but the headline was screwy and, oh, what are you going to do? But no, it's unclear in the story as well. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott, whatever his name is, Bessent, we'll just say Scott. Yeah, Scott Bessent. I got to find out how it's pronounced and then have somebody yell Bessent so that I can clarify who I'm yelling at. By the way, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent once agreed to occupy 2 different houses as his principal residence at the same time, which is difficult to do. Mortgage documents show, although I guess the documents actually show it this time, the same kind of contradictory pledges that President Donald Trump has been using to try to oust Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. Well, in the strictest sense, that's true. Those are the kinds of contradictory pledges that Trump has been using to try to oust her, but she didn't make them. And it doesn't really say, I'll continue. Bessent's conflicting agreements obligated him to occupy homes in New York and Massachusetts as his main residence, as I guess they didn't pluralize that, at the same time in 2007. But rest easy, everybody. But there's no sign of wrongdoing on his part, mortgage experts say. I mean, probably true, actually. Rather, his case demonstrates that an incongruity in home loan filings isn't necessarily proof of fraud. Of course, that's enough for firing for cause, even if it didn't happen over in the Lisa Cook story. Other evidence from Bessent's mortgages show that his lender, Bank of America Corp., wasn't relying on the pledges and never expected him to occupy both homes as primary residences. It's interesting how, well, this is the amazing thing is, not only did Cook, the Fed governor, as the headline puts it, not do this thing, which they say she does, not only did she not make that claim, but now that we found that the Treasury Secretary did make that claim, actually experts say it's not actually a big deal and maybe not even illegal and certainly not proof of any mortgage fraud. The black lady did it, it's for cause firing. Oh, she didn't do it? All right, well, let's not even bother saying that. Now, maybe we'll stop trying to fire her for that. We'll fire her for something else, but we'll stop saying anything about the mortgage thing because, as it turns out, it's really nothing. And by the way, they didn't even actually come up with that excuse once they found out that 3 other cabinet officials had already done this as well, because everybody is doing this. Every, successful person successful enough to own multiple properties is doing this. And Pulte knows it, and they're doing it at Pulte's behest, for that matter. That part of the story has yet to break, by the way. I think we're way, 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 way ahead of that one. Maybe we're wrong. But I think there's something there to be investigated, and there ought to be a look taken at it. And if you find that the answer is no, just report it, and we'll add it to the pile. Why not? Anyway, now that white guys are doing it, it's not really a big deal anyway. And it was supposed to be, and it was sort of the subtext of the Lisa Cook stories was, well, some experts say this is fairly common, and it's not even necessarily contradictory. It's certainly not proof of mortgage fraud. P.S. down in, paragraph 19. Anyway, also Bill Pulte's own parents apparently having done this as well. Now, but this is interesting, right? So they're still not letting Bloomberg not seemingly interested in clearing up the record on Cook. Cook's situation, they say, appears similar. It does not. Cook's situation appears to be the exact opposite of this situation. Ready for this? So if you thought it was just a slip up or a headline thing, Cook's situation appears similar. She signed mortgage documents in 2021 for a home in Michigan and a condo in Atlanta. So far, I guess that part is true. Saying they both would be her primary residence for the next year. No, she didn't. I mean, well, I'll qualify it even by saying maybe Bloomberg and its reporters who are actually doing research right now found that, well, one set of documents says yes, one set of documents says no. We can't tell which ones are the controlling documents. And I mean, they also did some research. They went to the bank who provided, who made Besant's mortgages and asked them, did they rely on this thing? And maybe they hadn't done that for Cook. And so one set of mortgage paperwork did say it, one set didn't say it, but nobody relied on it for these purposes. So that might have been a development that I missed since yesterday, but I don't think so. I think they missed yesterday's developments. And now that section of the world that relies for their news on Bloomberg thinks, well, okay, it's the same situation. So, hypocrisy on the part of the Trump officials, but ultimately it's not so bad. Only it's more than just that. It's also they were lying about what Cook did. Cook's situation really does not appear similar. She did not sign mortgage documents in 2021 for a home in Michigan and a condo in Atlanta, saying both would be her primary residences for the next year. Both agreements, they go on to say, with different credit unions, I like it, credit unions rather than banks, were conditions for getting loans on the properties of $203,000 and $540,000 respectively. But a document reviewed by Bloomberg News shows that the lender for Cook's Georgia property wasn't expecting her to live there full time. Probably because she had designated it a vacation home on that paperwork. A loan estimate issued by the credit union weeks before she got the mortgage refers to it as a, quote, vacation home. Well, that's why their situations aren't similar. You do have that information in front of you. So what was it that made you say that she signed documents indicating both would be her primary residence if it instead refers to it as a, quote, vacation home? Maybe because, again, there might be more than one document. This is, again, they're referring to it, as did the story prior, as the loan estimate. And God knows there are probably 10,000 pieces of paper involved in any mortgage. And maybe some of them said primary and some of them said vacation. But in her, I think the important and controlling thing, if you were asking me as a judge, I'd say, well, what does her financial disclosure forms say? And what do her security clearance declarations say? Vacation home? The SF-86, as we learned yesterday, says vacation home. All right. Well, when we ask her about it now, when she was about to take a government position, tell us if you've effed anything up. You got two primary residences? No, I don't. Okay. In a letter last month telling Cook she was fired, Trump said her contradictory mortgage pledges were reason enough to remove her from the Fed board. They are not legally all by themselves. Plus, he was wrong about what they said. But he said her contradictory mortgage pledges were reason enough to remove her from the Fed board, calling them, quote, potentially criminal conduct. But obviously not the case for Besant and any of the other cabinet members who may have done this, not to mention Pulte's parents. But it was either potentially criminal conduct or at least evidence of, quote, gross negligence. It'll be really interesting. He's a really fascinating figure in this sense sometimes, Donald Trump. I mean, talk about painting yourself in the corner. Logically speaking, he has to fire Besant or the other three cabinet members. He just has to, or else something. But Donald Trump is that something, and he does not care. And it will make him, roll his eyes and laugh to be asked to be consistent about these things. This is a black lady we're talking about. Come on. There's no comparison between her and a white guy. I don't know. I don't know what's driving it, but a lot of people think it's that. Anyway, I'm making a little clatter here with the teacup today, which ordinarily I would just have Greg talk over. But we're on to the last of the Pucka tea today, by the way, and I wanted to mention that. Thank you. And I believe this one came from Scott at some point. Scott! Thank you very much. I don't mean to yell about it. Triple ginger today. But yeah, I mean, I am drowning in tea, so I'm trying to catch up and make sure that we move through it here before, I don't know, does tea go bad? Anyway, I can tell you what does go bad: presidential administrations. Anyway, the action came as Trump sought to assert more direct control over the independent panel this year, complaining that it hasn't lowered interest rates swiftly enough. Cook is challenging her ouster in court, where she ought to be doing it for a number of reasons, where she said the allegations against her are false, and seems like an important piece of information in challenging the ouster. On Monday, a federal appeals court allowed Cook to continue working for now. A ruling the White House has said it will appeal, which is amazing given the latest reporting. Cook attended a Fed monetary policy meeting on Tuesday. White House officials didn't respond to a request for comment. So, yeah, that meeting was yesterday. Even though for some reason I thought it was Wednesday. It is Wednesday now, but I thought that the meeting was on Wednesday, which is today. But it wasn't. Cook's contradictory mortgage agreements, which are they? I mean, they really need to clear this up. It's certainly, I have to think that these guys at Bloomberg have seen different sets of papers that might be contradictory, but they're just not saying so, and it's very confusing. Cook's contradictory mortgage agreements are similar in at least some ways to the ones Besant, a Trump appointee, made years ago. We got to play our music, and I'll read you the rest. Or some of the rest. On September 20th, 2007, he, Besant, agreed that a 7-bedroom Georgian manor that he was buying in Bedford Hills, New York, would be his, quote, principal residence over the next year. On the same day, he made the same residency pledge about a beachfront house in Provincetown, Massachusetts, which of course means he's gay. I just, pointing that out. Both agreements were signed by a lawyer, Charles Rich, who had power of attorney to sign on Besant's half.
Hi everybody, this is Scott Anderson, your summary guy. Were you looking forward to an egalitarian democracy free of bigotry, misogyny, racism, and greed, where people of different appearances, belief, and heritage had a right to live without fear, and everyone could expect a basic level of health, stability, and safety throughout their life? Well, too bad. The plain fact is that we're heading in the wrong direction. And where we once had a voice in such things, increasingly we don't. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. However, if you're looking to join people who understand today's issues and can intelligently address the reality of today from your point of view, you can join us at Kagro in the morning. As you know, there aren't many of us out there, at least compared to them. We need to stick together, and by that I mean send us money. That is contributions to patreon.com, secure, reoccurring contributions. Those contributions keep this show on the air and us together. We've been through a lot together. The temporary loss of the presidency, we hope. The temporary loss of the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, we hope. Face it, we are pretty much all that we have left. Remember, we couldn't do it without you, and you shouldn't do it without us. We're in this together, so thanks.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Then on our way out the door, I was saying that the Bloomberg reporting was that Besant's documents were signed on his behalf by his attorney. I guess. I don't know. Everything screwed me up and I didn't get it out correctly. But that's, I guess that's one possible difference between the two of them is that I didn't do it. My lawyer did it. That's not great. Doesn't really help. Whereas I guess maybe Cook signed herself, but it's not clear. We don't know that either. But another interesting piece of nuance here right after a screenshot of the paperwork, the provision of the contract that deals with, what does it say here? Borrower's obligations to occupy the property. And I guess where it gets designated as a primary residence or principal residence. That was the word that they used here. But here's another bit of nuance that's sort of different, right? We found out that in Cook's case, there were two different credit unions making the loan. And so I guess it's possible, like if you're saying, well, what about the bank here? Why aren't the banks saying, hey, wait a second, you have two residences you're claiming as your principal or primary residence. What's the deal here? They never ask this question, but they could have, right? But you'd think it would be a lot less likely if it's two separate banks or credit unions making the loan. They have no particular reason to know about the other. Well, that's not even true, right? I mean, generally speaking, you're revealing just about everything, right down to the, your size of your underwear, to a bank that's lending you a couple $100,000 for a mortgage. They want to know everything, certainly about every other property you own, and whether anybody else has any claims on the property, and whether you owe any other money. Is this a first mortgage, second mortgage, things like that. So it is very likely that they would have asked you about what other property do you own? Where else are you? What else is happening to your money, your stream of income? Can we rely on your assertion that you're going to have enough to pay us? So they do ask that question. But, in the mortgage lending game, they don't have time for that nonsense, particularly with people that they think are making enough money to pay them. Please just issue the papers. We'll worry about it when we don't get paid. As long as we do get paid, let's not worry about it. That's generally how they handle those things. Plus, of course, a major, national mortgage-related scandal that David Dayen could talk to you about for hours at end on any given day, in which they didn't care at all who owned property. They were just going to try to take it from people or ask them to pay them for it, whether they took out a mortgage with them or not. But I digress. It's a slightly different story for Besant. I got to find out about that. Oh, because he got these two mortgages from the same lender on the same day, which is interesting. I guess, does that suggest to you that he's refinancing property that he already owned? Possibly. Anyway, I guess that would be a fair guess. But anyway, the mortgages were provided to Besant by the same lender, Bank of America. Maybe you've heard of them. They're from America. As part of a larger $21 million financing secured by the two houses and other assets. And remember, was he the one with the 200? No, that was maybe was the Cook ones. That is interesting. By the way, they don't, so far, no numbers offered on how much for these homes. Sounds pretty big, right? Well, one, Provincetown. It doesn't mean he's gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that, as they used to say back in the 90s, when that was actually supposed to be like a tolerant stance to take. It's very dated. Anyway, but Provincetown, if you know, I guess. Anyway, but it's a beautiful Cape Cod summer kind of a place. It wouldn't be cheap to get an oceanfront property anywhere. Provincetown, Cape Cod, certainly the case as well. I don't know the town where he bought, what was it? Something frou-frou sounding in New York. But they didn't have any numbers for this. But with Cook, we get the numbers. $203,000 in Michigan, $540,000 in Georgia. Interestingly, we only find out that, Bedford Hills, a 7-bedroom Georgian manor, not a mansion or not whatever, or McMansion or just plain house, manor, Bedford Hills, New York, but no dollars assigned to it. I find that interesting, just on some level. But it was part of a larger $21 million financing secured by the two houses and other assets. So there was some major operation of refinance going on for Besant at the time. And that's how it comes to be that he's signing mortgages for two separate properties on the same day with the same bank. But declaring both to be primary or principal residences for some reason. In response to Bloomberg's inquiries, Besant's representatives provided a statement from Bank of America affirming the bank's, quote, understanding and agreement that the Bedford and Provincetown properties were secondary residences, both of them. 7-bedroom secondary residence. What do you know? Rich, the lawyer who signed the agreements on Besant's behalf, wrote... Not really, but it's a lot of buzz. Bank of America was fully aware that the Provincetown, Massachusetts property was not a principal residence and waived any requirement that it be used as a principal residence. There was absolutely nothing improper about Mr. Besant's loan applications, with which he was minimally involved as he had delegated authority to me, So every excuse in the world not to make a big deal out of it, which should all apply to Cook, not necessarily the, power of attorney thing, but it should apply to Cook, but it doesn't have to apply to Cook because she didn't say the things that Besant had his lawyers say on his behalf. Besant was asked about the president's move against Cook during an appearance on Fox Business Network last month, before we knew that he had done this. Quote, "There are people who think that President Trump is putting undue pressure on the Fed," he said. "And there are people like President Trump and myself who think that if a Fed official committed mortgage fraud, this should be examined and that they shouldn't be serving as one of the nation's leading financial regulators," which, as it happens, is something that Besant is doing right now. Alex Spiro, a lawyer for Besant, not the one who signed these papers, said he couldn't comment on how Cook's situation compares with Besant's because he hadn't looked into Cook's circumstances in detail. In fact, nobody did until, somebody in the newspapers did. Besant's and Cook's mortgage situations aren't identical. Besant's mortgages were made almost 2 decades ago. Wow, that's a huge difference. And signed by his lawyer, while Cook signed hers personally and much more recently. Like, she was a normal person. She's got, as normal multiple property owners go, she's a successful professional woman. $203,000 mortgage and a $540,000 mortgage for people of means is not unusual in the least. She wasn't refinancing 2 homes and other assets, unidentified assets, for a $21 million total package. She was just, buying 2 different houses, 2 different properties. One is a vacation home, and one is apparently a relatively modest, or at least, or mostly paid for home in Michigan, because $203,000 mortgage is not an extravagance. I don't think, for somebody of means like this. Anyway, that's interesting. Well, hers was more recent. Yeah, but for a normal amount of money. His was gigantic and abnormal by almost any standard. Anyway, Besant was a wealthy hedge fund manager, signaling that he would have no trouble getting loans. She was just a very successful economics professor, in line for, so much so that she was, in fact, under serious consideration for appointment to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. So, but also she was black. So there you go. That's the answer. Besant was a not healthy, but wealthy, maybe also healthy, hedge fund manager, signaling he'd have no trouble getting loans, or conjuring up paperwork that would allow him to get loans anyway. And because both of Besant's mortgages were with the same bank, signed in the same day, there's no way his lender could possibly have been deceived about his plans to live somewhere else. Unless, of course, they said, let's let ourselves be deceived so that we can get our hands on the money. Cook's, which is what they did. They waived it. Screw it. Let's just take the money. He'll pay us. Don't worry about it. Cook's mortgages were from different banks and executed on different dates. I'm starting to not like the way Bloomberg is reporting this story at all. That said, similarities remain, which I guess you're supposed to take with dramatic music. Each ostensibly agreed to live in 2 different places as a principal residence at the same time. That's 4 places between the 2 of them, by the way. And that's only 2 of the properties that we know about in Besant's transaction. Although, as it turns out, Cook apparently owns more than 2 properties, too. Anyway, each has evidence that the incongruity wasn't misleading and that bankers were aware of the plans for the properties. The problem for the Trump administration is not one of wrongdoing. No, it's never that. Not about wrongdoing by the Treasury Secretary, but of double standards, caused by the president's decision to use a technical issue of primary residence to try to remove a perceived foe. Bill Pulte, the Trump appointee who runs the Federal Housing Finance Agency, furnished the president with the reason to fire Cook when he accused her of potential mortgage fraud last month on the social media platform X. She is one of 3 of the president's adversaries that Pulte has referred to Justice Department prosecutors for mortgage fraud investigations. He's not doing anything else in that office, I guess. The others are, of course, New York Attorney General Letitia James and Senator Adam Schiff, a California Democrat. You know why. All three have denied the allegations of mortgage fraud. On Saturday, after Reuters first reported the document showing Cook's lender expected the Georgia property to be a vacation home, Pulte argued that it made no difference. We got her anyway. She's still black. So, okay, Dr. Cook represents herself as an extremely accomplished financial operator, not like a hedge fund guy. Pulte wrote on social media site X, they really have to keep saying it that way, if Dr. Cook solicited estimates as a vacation home and then entered into a mortgage agreement as a primary residence, that is extremely concerning and, in my opinion, evidences further intent to defraud. Now, that's interesting. It's Pulte, the idiot, who gives us the first possible and plausible explanation for all of this confusion by possibly having an estimate of the mortgage terms drawn up under the assumption that it would be a vacation home. But then later, for some reason, the lender maybe then said primary residence on the paperwork for the actual mortgage. So it is possible, I suppose. I don't remember how much paperwork. I know that there's a lot. I don't remember exactly what all the details of the paperwork that you have to generate for something like this is. But I guess if you told me, I would probably nod and say, that sounds plausible. If you told me, well, first, tell us how you're going to use this thing. Okay, as a vacation home. All right, vacation home. All right, well, I'll get back to you tomorrow with an estimate. And then if it's acceptable to you, we can sign the paperwork and get the loan made. Come back, show me the estimate, shows me what the monthly payments are going to be. Okay, that's fine, great. Give me the mortgage. Now, it's also possible they give you the mortgage and they have written down primary, or they've checked off the box primary residence because it's like the default on the paperwork. And they hand it to you and you're like, all right, those numbers are the numbers you told me yesterday. I checked that. That seems fine. Sign on the dotted line. And then later, gotcha, we put down primary residence after you told us vacation residence. We made a paperwork mistake but you didn't catch it. You're the criminal here. Versus, I don't know. I never even, not at any point so far that we know, does Besant tell anybody that these are not primary residences. Okay. So it's interesting that Pulte, is continuing on. He keeps insisting that this is somehow criminal in nature. Besant is one of at least two members of Trump's cabinet to have made conflicting home occupancy pledges similar to Cook's. Lori Chavez DeRemer, the labor secretary, agreed in January 2021 to remain in her longtime Oregon home for the following year as a condition of getting a mortgage. Then in March, she made a similar pledge to occupy an Arizona property that she was buying. That doesn't make any sense. In July, she filed to run for a House seat as an Oregon resident. ProPublica reported on Chavez DeRemer's mortgages earlier this month. Chavez DeRemer had intended to make Arizona her primary residence when she got her mortgage there, but later changed her mind when she was asked to run for Congress. The spokeswoman, Courtney Perella, said in an email. She said Chavez DeRemer had followed the law. This is a non-story intended to attack the Trump administration, she said, but only because it was a non-story intended to attack a foe of the administration. If indeed Cook is a foe of the administration. I don't even know. Anyway, I'm sure she doesn't necessarily consider her, or didn't before they did this to her. And I could even buy the change your mind story, but I'm not certain that saves you if you're insisting that this is evidence of criminality. Owner occupancy clauses are standard parts of residential mortgage agreements. Lenders sometimes offer better terms on primary residences, such as lower interest rates or down payment requirements, because people are more likely to repay loans for homes in which they actually live. If someone deceives a lender about whether they plan to live on a property, it can be mortgage fraud, though criminal prosecutions are rare. Neither Cook's nor Besant's case sound like fraud because the borrower's plans to use the properties as secondary homes were disclosed to the lender, said Douglas Miller, a real estate lawyer in Excelsior, Minnesota, who has testified before a U.S. House committee about the mortgage market. If the lender knew and the mortgage application shows that, I have a hard time finding fault with the consumer, he said. Miller said the owner-occupancy clause is a standard part of U.S. mortgages, which they already said, and the typical way to waive the requirement for second homes is to attach an additional document known as a second home rider. It's possible that in the Cook and Besant cases, someone just forgot to include that form. He said, at some point, you need to rely on the fact that you made a disclosure to the lender, and if they missed the form, that's on them, he said. This whole thing is just blown out of proportion, which is actually the way it should have been approached from the beginning, but the hypocrisy issue makes it impossible to do that now. And by the way, at least Cook made some disclosure herself that it was supposed to be a vacation home. On the loan, on the mortgage estimate documents, it says vacation home. Now, I would accept that, okay, well, maybe at some point, if they don't include the rider, it's on the bank rather than on the borrower. Okay, if there was a disclosure made. Besant's people say, oh, yeah, the disclosure was made. They waived this stuff. All right, well, then where's the waiver document? Where's the second home rider? I don't know. Nobody said anything. But still, okay. It's commonplace. It happens all the time. Okay, that's how we started on this story. That's how Pulte made his millions of dollars. By knowing that it was commonplace. And by practicing this. Cook goes out of her way at some point at least to say, no, vacation home. Does it make it all the way through the process? Maybe not. It's the only explanation I've got for this contradiction that keeps getting reported. But, there's no such effort in the Besant documents that I have seen talked about. In a memorandum filed last month as part of the lawsuit challenging her firing, Cook raised the possibility that a clerical error led to her conflicting occupancy pledges, but added that even if she had done something wrong prior to joining the Fed, it couldn't serve as grounds for her removal. That's true, too. Cook's representatives declined to comment to Bloomberg. I have no intention of being bullied to step down from my position because of some questions raised in a tweet, Cook said in a statement last month. All right. I mean, that's good punctuation on it, but it's not the whole legal case. But the lawyers are making the legal case. I just thought that was interesting. Just amazing that, this leopard is eating my face. Well, F that. That's not a thing. I just found that really interesting. And, it's also interesting that there's confusion out there. It makes for a complicated story. I better get the hell off of this story, though, and move on to a couple of other things, because there's a lot. Let me go look at what those things are. I guess speaking of reversals / hypocrisy / I don't know what else story, we'd have to go way back on this one to say that we're updating a story. I don't even know if we've ever really discussed this stuff. We must have at some point on the show, but it might be 10 plus years ago. But I happened to see this morning a Blue Sky post from Anthony Michael, is it Kreis, Kreis, I keep seeing his name, constitutional law professor and historical political scientist, where, I don't know, Atlanta. I don't know, what institution. He doesn't say, which is fine, because if they do, the administration will come after them and try to close them down. Which is going to happen pretty soon to the University of California as well, particularly Berkeley, because of this thing. Anyway, Professor, Kreis, Kreis, I wish I knew. Our professor friend here has spotted something of interest in Politico. I'm not certain how exact. I don't know if he's borrowing that from the Howard Stern show expression of it, but how do you like this headline from Politico? Former GOP officials fear U.S. strikes on alleged drug smugglers, the Venezuelan boats, aren't legal. Well, that's bad, right? By ordering the military to blow up suspected drug boats, Trump is testing the limits of executive power again. Intriguing. Who are the former GOP officials saying so? Well, in one case, he does say multiple, right? Officials. One of them is John Yoo. Wow. Like one of the chief architects of the George W. Bush global war on terror era unitary executive expansion of executive power. The one who said, in debate, civilized debate, remember, that it might be, conceivably okay for the government to, let's say, pardon everybody, it is breakfast time, but this is true. They said crush the testicles of a terrorism suspect's child, like in front of them as a torture methodology. If, depending on the reason the president felt he needed to order that to be done, that on presidential orders that could be okay. Depending on the reason, which I guess he probably followed up with. There's probably very few things which would warrant that kind of reasoning. And I assume they're talking ticking time bomb type scenarios. There's a nuclear weapon hidden in New York City that will kill millions, and it could be revealed by this guy, and then it would be an okay thing to do. I think that's what they were trying to get at. I mean, never mind the headache you get trying to consider this in a normal frame of reference, but that's John Yoo, and he's currently professor of constitutional law at UC Berkeley, which is a public institution. And now he's got to look out that the leopards that he created don't eat his face as a result of saying, oh, actually, there's a limit on this stuff, and President Trump has exceeded it. It's a little ironic that it's John Yoo that says so, given that he was okay with the this sort of torture. But hey, what can I tell you? Anyway, that's the news from Politico. The excerpt, if I don't read you the whole story, is the screenshot that our professor here has chosen to highlight. A quote from you that goes, "There has to be a line between crime and war," said John Yoo, unless, of course, you're talking about war crimes, in which case the problem is that the line has disappeared. There has to be a line between crime and war, but not a line between war crimes, said John Yoo, a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush, as they put it mildly. We can't just consider anything that harms the country to be a matter for the military, because that could potentially include every crime. Yes, that's true. He's right about that. Probably something he might even have conceded while he was Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. But there you have it. That's interesting. And remember, again, now that if he's going to be out there in criticism of not George W. Bush, the other president that we don't like, Donald Trump, he works at a public university, and they're very terrible, terrible people, and they shouldn't be getting any grants. Eli Stokols and Josh Gerstein are the reporters on this full Politico piece, which is somewhat interesting. I'm curious, maybe can I scan and see if there are other people speaking out about this? There's a little bit more here that wasn't in the screenshot. You, that is to say, YOO, the professor, not you, the listener, now a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, authored the Bush administration's legal justifications for enhanced interrogation techniques against suspected al-Qaeda terrorists in the early years of the Bush War on Terror. While combating terrorism did shift following the terror attack on September 11th from a law enforcement concern to a military endeavor, the White House has not asked Congress to declare war on the Tren de Aragua gang cartel, nor Venezuela, nor has the administration made a concerted attempt to convince the public that the threat it poses to the U.S. justifies such heavy preemptive force. And no, they haven't. Are there other former officials that get us to the use of the plural in the headline? Let's see. I'm scanning. A former senior Air Force lawyer, Charles Dunlop, urged more transparency from the administration. There's that. Depending on the evidence, there might be paths where the strikes could be legal, says Dunlop, now a Duke University law professor, but I don't think it's helping the administration by not being fully transparent about everything. They had to draw them to the conclusion that the military/law of war type response was what was necessary. That's certainly true. So I guess that's it. Are there others? Legal experts have called on the administration to release a formal legal opinion justifying the strikes. Well, okay. I mean, it's maybe just a technicality, I guess. Even if they don't have a second former Republican administration official on record questioning it. They have some people. I mean, it may be that the guy we just heard from worked, among other things, under a former Republican administration, but nobody like John Yoo who worked like that directly for the administration, as opposed to some department as a, career official, and it happened to be during the George W. Bush administration. Okay, I just found that interesting. As was there, it was a random comment that I saw made by, some friendly person out on the interwebs. Michael Fletcher, a retired intelligence analyst himself, who just happened to have pointed out in the course of his own observation of all sorts of things, all sorts of contradictions. But I think this one came in the context of the attempt at criminalizing the critique of Charlie Kirk or Turning Point USA, and that would therefore make you part of a criminal conspiracy with terroristic tendencies in some way. But Michael was pointing out here that it turns out that the Biden years, as he says it, were ultimately not a new birth of freedom, putting a stop to Trumpian decay, but an interregnum that held no one of significance accountable and allowed the further destruction of the system that they were sworn to protect to proceed almost unhindered. This is the end of a slightly lengthier discussion of the situation, but I thought a good point, and it reminded me very much of the same situation in the Obama administration. Similar dynamic, I said, as with the Obama administration and the Bush's global war on terror inspired unitary executive expansion of powers. No accountability for anyone of consequence in the years following. And as it turns out, just another, it ended up standing for the principle that a Democratic administration would offer you just that, an interregnum, a period of relative normalcy in between emergencies, constitutional emergencies overseen by Republican presidents. And, some people knew that was going to be the case. Like 2009, when I told Barack Obama directly, the next Republican president, without this sort of pushback, is going to do the same and worse. All right, there's the button I was looking for. Welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I should have told you that about 5 seconds ago, but reading and battling with the button at the same time. So anyway, lots of things to catch up on here, and I don't know. I thought that was a very interesting one, and we need to keep that in mind as we plod towards what might be, the next presidential election. Maybe yes, maybe no, who knows? We'll see. But looming question, just as it was in the beginning of the Obama administration. And it very quickly became clear that just wasn't going to be a priority. But it was did good things happen? Yes. Could they have happened if there had been this kind of focus on accountability for the previous administration? Maybe not. That was the argument. And you were supposed to think at the time, and maybe you look back on it and think about it this way, maybe not, but you were supposed to basically take the Affordable Care Act in trade for that accountability. That would set off a major argument, I think, and I don't know how to settle that one. It was an extraordinary accomplishment. It is an accomplishment that could still be destroyed, but then again, I guess on that narrow point, you might say, had the Obama administration made its focus accountability for the unlawful and unconstitutional expansion of executive authority, as a nice way of saying it, in the Bush administration, and not gotten, or even actually, let's say it did get the Affordable Care Act passed. But anyway, that kind of accountability, that's not a permanent thing either. As you now, I think, know. I don't know that we could have made the same argument with the same force then. Well, if you hold people accountable, the next Republican administration can just reverse it, because we didn't think that the next Republican administration was going to be so crazy, incompetent, reckless, what have you. But I did say that that's entirely possible. I'm not telling you I thought that Donald Trump was going to be the president. I didn't. I didn't know he was going to run. I wouldn't have predicted that he was going to run. When he did run, I didn't predict he was going to win. So even when I didn't predict he was going to win the nomination, much less the presidency. And then when it was in general election time, I also did not predict he was going to win that. I didn't. But I did predict that the very next Republican administration was going to pick up where the George W. Bush administration left off and go far beyond what they did and do more and worse starting from the place they left off if we did nothing. Of course, I guess if you had asked me, I might have conceded at the time. I don't know if I would have come up with the argument, but I would have conceded it was true, I think, that if you had said, what if we do hold them accountable and there's a next Republican administration? What will happen there? I guess I would have to have conceded. Somebody probably could have talked me into it that, yes, the next Republican administration could start off where the last one left off and do more and worse on the same grounds, expanded and multiplied by 1,000 if they want to. Now, I probably would have said, but we would have established that it was illegal or that it was impeachable or that it was punishable by law. Yes, like January 6th. And you know where that landed. I guess it would have taken me a couple minutes of consideration to say, well, you'd be talking about an extraordinarily reckless Republican administration who would have to say, to hell with everything. I'm pardoning everybody who was impeached, thrown out of all. You can't pardon the impeachment, allegedly. But you can turn them all loose, legalize this stuff after the fact, and just say, nothing wrong here. We're going to continue with our efforts. And I might even pardon myself if necessary. I would have said, I don't know offhand in 2009 the name of the Republican that would do this, unless it was Dick Cheney. But ironically, he's not saying that he would do this now, nor is his daughter. Honestly, that's quite surprising. But so is John Yoo being on the other side of this. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of an interesting point. But yeah, I guess if we'd given it a moment's thought as a hypothetical in 2009, you could have said, yeah, that too, this accountability is also impermanent. So you might say, what's the difference? Well, one difference is here we've improved dramatically the lives of millions and millions, hundreds of millions of Americans. And if they're going to take it away, the argument was then, well, 100 million people, can't be ignored. They'll rise up against you and they'll vote against you at the ballot box and you'll never gain power. Sound, satisfying at the time, I suppose. Whereas, getting people to care about the intricacies of constitutional law, even if it was a major violation of the Constitution, we're all supposed to, know instinctively, what violation of the Constitution? That's bad. I won't vote for anybody who does that. It's just never that cut and dried. As opposed to, I know what it means to be able to pay my bills and go to the doctor. That I get. Thank you. On the other hand, in 2009, maybe we didn't know yet that a major portion, as it turns out, in the end, an important majority or important plurality of the American electorate was going to be convinced within a few years that being able to go to the doctor and live your life was communism/socialisms and imported from Africa at that. And we had to do something about it, and the whole country lost its mind. I don't know that I would have known that. But anyway, there you have it. What else was I going to tell you about? Oh, I don't know. Do we have time for anything else? Sure. Why not? Returning to stories we've covered in the past. This one I got to read to find out if it's discussing exactly what I thought was happening and therefore vindicate some of my earlier speculation or not. You may remember that in the flood of things we talked about in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, one of the more amazing, in a very bad way, developments was a flood of social media content, specifically Facebook content, that appeared to be somewhere between AI slop and Russian propaganda. I declared it to be like among the most Russian things I had seen. Was fake stories, an easy thing to do to generate on Facebook. It allows you to do that. Claiming that mega famous sports figures, entertainers, and the like had spontaneously called for moments of silence in remembrance of Charlie Kirk, and very melodramatic. The audience was in tears, dramatic moment. He could hardly speak. Bob Dylan did it in concert. Probably not. Bruce Springsteen did it in concert. Probably not. Some country music star did it in concert. Well, probably. Tennis professionals, baseball professionals. It was happening everywhere, and they were all very, very similar, which made you think like it was cut from a template, which seemed very Russian. But I had nothing to go on. Nobody was saying, "Hey, Russia's doing it." Not even Empty Wheel, I don't think, was saying this sure looks Russian. Although I guess if I had asked at the time, she probably would have said, "Yeah, that does look Russian." Or she would have said, "That does look Russian," and I thought so yesterday, and I wrote 4,000 words about it. Here it is. She's on the ball. Well, today the AP has this story. Foreign disinformation. Is it today? Then yeah. Foreign disinformation about Charlie Kirk's killing seeks to widen U.S. divisions, which is, of course, extremely Russian to want to do, but also others. David Klepper is the reporter here for the AP. Russia moved to amplify online conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk's killing just hours after it happened, seeding social media with the frightening claim that America is slipping into civil war, although I frankly thought that those were very American, very MAGA things to say about this, because MAGA leaders were in fact saying we are slipping into civil war. In fact, I'm pushing us into civil war because of this assassination. So it might not be, I don't know whether they're going to get around to, or anybody's going to get around to analyzing the fake stories about entertainers and sports figures asking for moments of silence, but it is right up their alley. But this seems to be talking about conspiracy theories about the assassination in particular, as opposed to sappy responses to it. Anyway, Chinese and pro-Iranian groups also spread disinformation about the shooting, with those loyal to Iran's interests backing anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, while bots linked to Beijing claimed that Kirk's death shows that the United States is violent, polarized, and dysfunctional. Well, lots of other evidence for that too. Interesting, though, the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. I hadn't heard them, but I just saw Laura Loomer complaining about them and saying, yeah, we got to track down and get these people. And I don't know who she was blaming for it, but it's interesting that would disturb her so greatly. That seems to be, she's found her footing, I guess, afterwards. Something to rail about that's uniquely Loomerish, and not just falling in line behind everyone else. She's looking to stand out. Not just falling in line behind everyone else, properly mourning Charlie Kirk. Anyway, America's adversaries have long used fake social media accounts, online bots, and disinformation to depict the U.S. as a dangerous country beset with extremism and gun violence. How do they get away with that? Kirk's killing has provided another opportunity for those overseas eager to shape public understanding while inflaming political polarization. And also, by the way, for those not overseas. But anyway, Charlie Kirk's death and the coming civil war, tweeted Russian ultranationalist Alexander Dugin, whose influence earned him the moniker Putin's brain, referring to Russia's president, Vladimir Brain. As you know. Yeah, thank you. We know who Russia's president is. Pro-Russian bots blamed Democrats and predicted more violence. Also, by the way, Republican elected officials. You don't need pro-Russian bots for that. But it is interesting that pro-Russian bots are saying the same thing as prominent Republican elected officials, blaming Democrats, predicting more violence. Russian state media published English language articles with headlines claiming a conspiracy orchestrated by shadowy forces. Was Charlie Kirk's killer a pro? It's worth asking about a one-shot 100-yard plus, although as it turns out, I guess the distance is getting smaller and smaller, and it might end up being something in the neighborhood of 175 feet. I mean, it's a good shot, but you're not supposed to kill people with those good shots. I'm just pointing out that would be easy speculation right at the beginning. Wow, that was some kind of shot. And evidence emerging that he had a $2,000 scope on this rifle, which I don't know as scope prices go what that's going to get you, but it sounds like it did the job. Foreign disinformation makes up a tiny fraction of the overall online discussion about Kirk's death, but it could undermine any efforts to heal political divisions or even spur further violence. We've seen multiple Russian campaigns attempting to exploit Kirk's killing, said Joseph Bodnar, a senior research manager at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. In many cases, the campaigns aren't adding new claims, but are recycling ones that emerged from American users. Well, yeah, they're picking up on domestic actors and amplifying them. That would be, that'd be the smart way to do it if you're not sure that you are correctly reading the nuances of American politics, if there are nuances in American politics. You could just copy content that's out there and amplify it. And that explains part of the, So it could be that Republican elected officials I'm not parroting Russian propaganda. I'm writing Russian propaganda. They're just stealing it from me. I'm writing it as American propaganda. They're putting it on their servers and making it Russian propaganda. It's not my fault that Russian propagandists think the things that I say are perfect for use as Russian propaganda. It is your fault. But I mean, other than my not wanting it to be, do you have anything else? No, I'm sorry, I don't. Adversaries tailor disinformation is the next section here. In each case, those spreading the disinformation have tailored it for their own ends. Chinese propaganda has focused on the violent nature of Kirk's death, painting the U.S. as a nation of violent gun owners and political extremists. They're painting by numbers in this. This is not an original work. Russian voices have tried to tie Kirk's death to U.S. support for Ukraine, even spreading a conspiracy theory that the Ukrainian government killed Kirk because of his criticism of that aid. That's a stretch. I don't know that that's going to find any buyers here. Pro-Iranian groups took a different tack, claiming Israel was behind Kirk's death and that the suspect was set up to take the fall. This conspiracy theory caught on with white supremacist groups in the U.S., showing how corrosive claims can easily spread online despite oceans and linguistics and cultural barriers. False and misleading claims can spread quickly following big news events as people go online looking for information. Artificial intelligence programs that can create a lifelike video and audio can make it even harder to find the truth, as can AI chatbots that routinely offer up false information. Oh, by the way, also online AI chatbots that routinely offer up, in some cases offer up correct information, but information that irritates Elon Musk. That was a screenshot widely circulating of, I guess, questions and answers I don't know whether it was directly about the Kirk assassination or Charlie Kirk's record as a commentator. I think that was it. And somebody asked Grok, what's up with Charlie Kirk? Is he a hateful bigot or is he a Christian motivational speaker? And they were like, nah, hateful bigot. And that screen cap circulated by Elon Musk saying this is so embarrassing. We're going to fix this thing. I'll fix Grok's AI brain tomorrow. It was interesting too, right? One of these two guys, considering that they have the opposite positions on this, either Grok or Elon Musk have got the brain virus that Musk always says is afflicting everybody. It's one of the two of them. And Elon, you made Grok's brain. So I don't know what to tell you. Somewhere along the line, this is a problem with you. But anyway, it's a good illustration of how dangerous it is that an idiot and billionaire like Elon Musk has got control over this machine that very serious people still proclaim is the one and only place that you should be exchanging ideas. I don't know. Anyway, right. So where were we with this? AI chatbots can routinely offer up false information. It happened again following Kirk's killing when misinformation about the shooting and the suspect quickly spread online. In recent years, groups looking to spread confusion or distrust have seized on hurricanes, wars, the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, COVID-19 pandemic, and other disasters, as well as the attempted assassinations of President Donald Trump. By the way, yes, the attack on the U.S. Capitol is a disaster in the wake of, or in the theme here of hurricanes, wars, COVID. It wasn't a brilliant display of patriotism. No. The details vary, but the conspiracy theories pushed by the foreign adversaries all suggest American institutions, the government, the media, law enforcement, healthcare are failing and can no longer be trusted, and that more violence is likely. Then come the calls for social media companies to crack down, but in a certain way. Regardless of the source of the information, social media companies should do more to stop both foreign disinformation and domestic calls for violence, said Imran Ahmed, CEO of the Center for Countering Digital Hate. There's a lot of centers out there, which tracks online disinformation. Posts calling for retaliatory violence following Kirk's death have been seen 43 million times on X alone, not necessarily by people, according to the center's research, though it can't say which posts came from foreign sources. Platforms like X are failing catastrophically to limit the reach of posts that celebrate murder and mayhem, Ahmed said. Russia, China, and Iran have all denied targeting Americans with disinformation. Officials in China have specifically pushed back on claims that Chinese social media bots are being used to amplify false claims about the Kirk shooting. China condemns all unlawful and violent acts. That said, we firmly oppose some U.S. politicians accusing China of instilling disinformation and encouraging violence. A spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry posted on X. For foreign adversaries looking to sow discord in the U.S., disinformation can be highly effective and cheap. For authorities trying to keep the public informed, the false claims about Kirk's death are a potentially dangerous effort to hijack American discourse. There is a tremendous amount of disinformation we're tracking. Utah Governor Spencer Cox, a Republican, said in a recent press conference about Kirk's killing, "What we are seeing is our adversaries want violence. We have bots from China, Russia, all over the world saying or trying to instill disinformation and encourage violence." That's what the Chinese spokesperson was responding to. Cox urged people to ignore bogus claims that seem to elicit fear and suggested that Americans log off social media and spend time with family instead. By the way, he should have urged that people ignore bogus claims that seem designed to elicit unity, as long as it's their kind of unity. Moments of silence and everybody weeping. You should probably be ignoring that as well. No mention of that there. I still think you're likely to find out that was driven by either initiated by or picked up on by and multiplied by foreign disinformation agents as well. All right, so keeping an eye on that story, and then doubling back on a couple of other stories that have been of tremendous interest here. More on the situation, the developing and expanding crisis with Korea over the raid at the Hyundai electric vehicle battery plant. Elidel, is that right? Elibel? I don't remember where. I used to know the name. It was fun and easy to pronounce, I thought. But now I'm not so sure. I doubt myself every time. This, though, from Forbes magazine, has an interesting bent and gives us another opportunity to head in this direction. Maybe this is something I should be reading for Friday or pre-recorded shows later. I told you there's been an explosion of Stephen Miller profiles. Entirely appropriate. We've never caught up with the various other previous explosions of Stephen Miller profiles, but a new round of them now, and this gives us an excuse to head in that direction. Stephen Miller's quota likely drove Korean arrests in immigration raid. And I'm not certain if this is where this thing I'm thinking of came from, but I saw something last night along with this that indicated that you remember when we read the story about the raid that the ICE agents showed up and they said, "We've got a warrant for this whole place." And then they proceeded to arrest several, a couple hundred people, mostly Koreans. As it turns out, well, as I saw last night, now I have to go and verify the source of it and make sure. But the hint from what I saw last night was that, in fact, the warrant that they showed up with, which again, paperwork, Trump and paperwork, man. And really, with all of these immigration raids, this is a repeated issue where people who, know a little something about what's supposed to be going on say, "Show me the warrant. Do you have a warrant signed by a judge?" Because they have things that they'll style warrants, but they're not signed by judges and they're just, immigration arrest orders, but not the same thing as a judicial warrant. And almost every time they say, yeah, I got a warrant, show it to me. No, I'm not showing it to you. And then when, if ever, the paperwork is displayed, it's not a judicial warrant. Right. So we have a warrant for this whole place. Really? You got a magistrate judge to sign off on a search of the entirety of this plant? Well, as it turns out, they had a warrant judicially signed. I don't know, but it was targeting 4, I think, Latino immigrants. 4. And of course, Latino, because that's who they're, but they saw an opportunity there. Look at all these foreign looking people. Let's arrest all of them. Why would you do something like that? Stephen Miller's quota likely drove Korean arrests and immigration rate. But by the way, the other story there is if you are handed a warrant, go arrest these 4 specific guys, Latino guys, who are working somewhere in this plant. Now, you may have a warrant to look for the whole plant for those people, but to turn that into, by the way, arrest 500 Koreans as well. Well, you guys might not understand this thing you're doing called law enforcement very well. Stuart Anderson reports for Forbes, and I think we can actually read it too, so let's do it. When ICE agents decided to arrest over 300 Korean workers at a Georgia battery plant, a White House imposed daily immigrant arrest quota was likely on their minds. And remember, these are the guys who, if the issue is affirmative action, no quotas, no quota, you're the quota. If it's arresting people and punishing minorities, well then, of course, quota away. All right, I got to make a note to myself. 1, always leave a writing instrument here so that I can write notes to myself. I have no idea how I convince myself to take these writing instruments away in the course of the day. But note to self, I want to find that thing about the warrant for 4 people if it's not in this story. All right, let's read. The quotas. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement raid at the Hyundai LG battery plant near Savannah, we don't get to say what the name of this town is, created an international incident that called into question future large manufacturing investments in the United States. And I might add to that at this point, the future of the hosting the Olympics and World Cup here. South Korea, as I said, has got grounds for speaking to a lot of people around the country and around the world about, is this going to be safe? I'm thinking maybe no. But all right, they're going to limit it to investment because it's Forbes. Okay, many people blame the event on shortcomings in U.S. visa options or as a necessary outcome when enforcing immigration laws. However, according to an immigration attorney representing several arrested workers, ICE agents chose to arrest the Korean workers to fulfill the quota of 3,000 daily immigrant arrests set by White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, elected to precisely 0 offices. Senate confirmed to precisely 0 offices. An analysis of an immigration raid is the section title here. On August 31st, 2025, U.S. Magistrate Judge Christopher Wray, issued a warrant to allow ICE to search the Georgia battery plant, a joint venture of Hyundai and LG Energy Solutions, naming 4 Mexican nationals as, quote, targeted persons. This, I guess, a credit here given to the Savannah Morning News, obtaining a copy of the search warrant. It's there. From the description, I think it's fair to assume that they're not lying and say, yes, it is a regular magistrate-issued and signed judicial warrant. But again, 4 Mexicans. Did you say 500 Koreans? No. Again, 400? 4, this is like you would do 4, F-O-U-R, parentheses, the number 4, Mexican nationals. Got it. 500 Koreans, just like you said, boss. Real sexy. That's an internet meme, by the way. And if I, find it inscribed on some bullets, I'll know exactly what they're talking about. Even if the rest of the world doesn't. Nothing in the warrant indicated ICE intended to arrest South Korean workers helping to set up a battery plant for electric vehicles slated to employ 2,000 U.S. workers. Yeah. What about those 2,000? Well, your job's on hold, everybody. But that was the announcement. The ICE people are there. As I remember them saying, we've got a warrant to search the whole place. For what? for really. That's interesting. Okay. On September 4th, 2025, approximately 400 state and federal law enforcement personnel raided the battery plant. Now, this is where it becomes really interesting. You have a warrant. We have a warrant to search the whole place. For what? 4 people. Why did you bring 100 officers per Mexican in this situation? And the answer is because, as we read the other day, there was some local crazy Republican Karen lady. I'm sorry, Karen. But that's essentially it. Who running for Congress and looking to make a splash, I guess, as the primaries approach, a year away. And she called in the complaint, but she doubtless, I'm sure she didn't call in about 4 Mexicans. I saw 4 Mexicans, but while you're there, arrest all the Koreans. And they said, yeah, sure, we should do that because the law means nothing to any of us. Wow. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's read more from this AP story because it's actually, I think, extraordinarily interesting now that we have this raid on the battery plant in hindsight. We're still watching the fallout here. The Koreans are nationally outraged about this, it seems. So let's see. Oh, wait a minute. I'm stuck on the AP story about disinformation. Where's the Forbes story we were reading? There we are. Back to this. And by the way, pointing out Stephen Miller's role in all this is the purpose of this piece, as it turns out. So where were we? The quota, daily quota, 3,000 daily immigrant arrests. So if you have a warrant for 4 of them, you're not going to want to stop there. If you can plausibly make 500 other arrests of people who are clearly foreign, whether they're actually here illegally or not. As they say these days, I suppose the version of it is, deport them all, let God sort them out. Anyway, August 31st, they actually got a warrant for 4 Mexican nationals. They show up. We have a warrant. Technically, yes, you have a warrant to search the whole place. It doesn't say you have a warrant to arrest everybody in it. But nonetheless, on September 4th, they show up. 400 state and federal law enforcement personnel raided the battery plant. When they came upon 175 to 200 Latino workers, not all of them working unlawfully, ICE agents also encountered hundreds of South Korean workers. And I didn't hear a great deal about 175 to 200 Latino workers arrested. I can't believe that they let them go. Did they? And if they did and decided to arrest the Koreans instead, yeah, there's some questions that the Koreans are going to require answers about, and they're just not going to be satisfied with the answers because the answers aren't satisfactory. They can't possibly be satisfactory. Charles Kuck. I'd hate to be walking around with that name at this stage of the game, but there you go. It's Kuck. Charles Kuck. Not Charlie Kirk, not Charlie Kuck. Charles Kuck the sophisticated kind of cuck. An immigration attorney at Cuck Baxter in Atlanta. Poor Baxter. What happened to him? He got cucked. It's all in Atlanta. And by the way, all their homes, allegedly primary residences, represents 11 individuals arrested in the raid and pieced together what happened at the facility. He's a smart guy. ICE did not bring Korean language interpreters, proof that Koreans were not the intended target. Well, evidence that tends to prove that Koreans were not the intended targets. But there's nothing so far has convinced me that Koreans were the intended target. But they managed to determine that the South Koreans at the facility entered on B-1 visas, or the electronic system for travel authorization known as ESTA. The question now is, now we should be looking back at that weirdo Republican Karen and asking, did she complain about Koreans at this site? Or was she saying, I was complaining about the Mexicans I saw there, and we were only able to get a warrant on about 4 of them. But I know that there's a couple hundred, so I wanted it raided for those purposes. Or was she being anti-Korean as well? I'm kind of curious about that. Well, not thinking that B1 and ESTA allow after sales service and installation, which is what the Koreans were doing in setting up the equipment to make the batteries at the facility, ICE agents decided on the spot, because of all their extensive constitutional law training, to arrest all the South Korean workers, said Cuck in an interview. One of Cuck's South Korean clients had just arrived the night before and was sitting in a conference room in a business suit attending a meeting when arrested by ICE. A business suit! You can't arrest people in business suits. They're in business suits, which is immunity, I think, somehow, and something. And also, you're allowed to go on television and say anything you want. But, well, I don't know what to tell you. And so, did he overstay his visa? I don't know. He got here yesterday. You think he overstayed his visa? He's in a business suit. Anyway, that means nothing, but you know what I'm talking about. On September 5th, 2025, in case you were wondering what year, ICE sent out a press release and a video of the operation stating, quote, as a result of the initial investigation, 475 individuals were detained. The press statement also declared the individuals arrested during the operation were found to be working illegally in violation of the terms of their visas and or statuses. People on short-term or recreational visas are not authorized to work in the U.S. Well, they weren't on them. As Cuck points out, it is not true that all individuals on short-term visas are not authorized to work in the United States. Okay. According to USCIS, anyone know what that is? I don't. But U.S. Customs and Immigration Service. There we go. According to USCIS, B1 classification allows, among other business activities, certain services related to international contracts / sales and installation / servicing of foreign equipment, not involving local labor for hire and construction. In other words, exactly what was going on here. The ICE video showed a stream of vehicles pulling up to the facility and featured agents arresting South Koreans and others in body cuffs. The images caused a furor when broadcast in South Korea. The arrest of the South Koreans was entirely driven by Stephen Miller's arrest quota, said Cuck. ICE agents screwed up by arresting people who did not abuse the visa, were eligible to engage in the type of work for which they were admitted, but ICE considered it a successful operation because they met Miller's quota of arresting 3,000 immigrants a day. And by the way, if you're here on a short-term visa to install equipment and then you've got a return flight home booked, are you an immigrant? No, you're not. At the end of the day, at the end of May 2025, quote, Stephen Miller, a senior White House official, told Fox News that the White House was looking for ICE to arrest 3,000 people a day, a major increase in enforcement. The agency had arrested more than 66,000 people in the first 100 days of the Trump administration, an average of about 660 arrests a day, reported the New York Times. In September, Lydia DePillis, no H in there, DePillis, and Hamed Ali-Aziz wrote in the New York Times, worksite enforcement is seen as a way to put large numbers of arrests on the board. Worksite and, of course, Home Depot arrests, as you know. Stephen Miller ordered ICE. How can he order anything? I don't know. He just does because Donald Trump lets him run around like he's one of his kids and do whatever he wants. You should smack him like he smacks his kids. Stephen Miller ordered ICE to arrest 3,000 people a day to achieve 1 million deportations a year and to go to Home Depot and other businesses rather than focus on criminals, like look for day laborers. People who annoy me by looking foreign when I am out shopping is essentially what he did. But by the way, just to illustrate the scale here, right? We remember what it was like during the first couple months of the administration, and they were arresting people left and right and rounding people up outside 7-Elevens and Home Depots, etc. That was 66,000 people arrested in the first 100 days. But again, that's only 660 arrests a day. He's looking for 3,000. And when he gets to 3,000, the achievement, such as it is, will be 1 million deportations a year. He's, president for 4 years, right? 1 million deportations a year. Remember, though, that we're talking about a candidate in Donald Trump who promised 11 million and sometimes 20 million deportations. So if they get to 1 million a year, 3,000 a day, they'll get 4 million of the minimally 11 million that they said they were going to deport from the United States. So he's never got, thank God, I think he'll never be able to deliver on this. I don't know what it would take to get them to the level that they would need. And I guess here we're talking about, basically they should go to Korea, arrest Korea, and deport them to, I guess, Uganda or wherever else, the other third-party countries that they're sending people to. That's the only way you're going to get to the numbers you promised. I don't want them to get to the numbers they promised, but just thinking about the enormity, the scale of what they said they were going to do and what people bought into. Like if you were actually a fan of this, 11 million people should be deported. Do you have any idea what it's going to take to deport even 4 million? If you get 1 million a year, you're never going to make it to 11 million. Think about that. I mean, you more than double what you're doing. You have to talk about 7,500 arrests a day. And all of them have to result in deportation, which they do because there's no due process. So I guess that part of it isn't problematic. But the amount of the percentage of the country's GDP that will be dedicated to throwing out people who generate GDP is going to be rather remarkable. All right. So Stephen Miller ordered ICE somehow to arrest 3,000 people a day in order to achieve 1 million deportations a year. And forget focusing on criminals. You're never going to make it focusing on criminals. Just focus on anybody that looks like you could get away with claiming they're foreign. Those orders helped precipitate the ICE arrests in Los Angeles and the protests in that city that followed. Next up, an immigration raid prompts a reaction from Trump and South Korea. The ICE arrests at the Georgia battery plant resulted in significant economic fallout. According to LG Energy Solutions, construction at the plant will remain on hold until the first half of 2026, reported WJCL, delaying by several months when U.S. workers can begin to fill jobs at the facility. Sorry, folks, you have to stay out of work. The incident also raised questions about future South Korean investments in the United States. This issue could have a considerable impact on foreign direct investment in the U.S., said South Korean President Lee Jae-myung. We are urging the U.S. side to normalize the visa process related to investment, whether by securing sufficient visa quotas or by creating a new category of visa, or I was going to say creating a new agency to actually handle them because the ones you've got handling them aren't. The ICE operations created a significant disconnect between the Trump administration's immigration arrest quotas and Donald Trump's desire to attract foreign company investment to build U.S.-based manufacturing facilities. U.S. President Donald Trump offered to allow hundreds of South Korean workers arrested during an immigration raid to stay in the United States, but only one has opted to remain, South Korean officials said, according to a Reuters report on the subject. Trump's overture sought to encourage the workers to stay and train Americans, according to the officials. Yeah, they're not going to feel comfortable doing that. Trump also posted a statement on social media saying he wanted to welcome workers from foreign companies investing in the United States to come for a time on visas to provide expertise and training. Analysts note that such a statement is likely meaningless to companies when Miller runs the Trump administration's immigration policies, and the focus remains on meeting arrest quotas and blocking high-skilled workers from the United States. By the way, so note to negotiators, if you think you have a deal with Donald Trump, you don't, unless you have a deal with Stephen Miller, in which case you also don't have a deal. Just so you know, there's no negotiating with this guy, because that guy isn't even running immigration enforcement. It's someone totally different. Wow. Trump. All right. Okay. So Trump was saying, yeah, come and train people so that we can put Americans to work, but also you're under arrest. So no, there's no dealing with Trump. It's meaningless. Don't bother. Moreover, any company, particularly a foreign company, has an ongoing need for skilled workers, including as part of a multinational team, to develop and update product lines, not only to start operations, notes economist Mark Regets, like regrets without the second R, but does he say Reget perhaps? I don't know. Regets? I don't think that would be the pronunciation. I don't know. Mark, call in and let us know. He is an NFAP senior fellow. I'm sure they must have told us at some point earlier what NFAP was. But, okay. The more than 300 detainees from South Korea, by the way, arrived home to significant media attention. There was widespread anger across the political spectrum in South Korea at the behavior of the U.S. authorities, with one newspaper referring to the workers being treated like prisoners of war, and another describing Koreans as feeling stabbed in the back by their closest ally, reported The Guardian. I'm sure North Korea won't exploit that little bit of information in any way. Even after it became evident that ICE had made a mistake and caused an international incident, the agency wanted to put the South Koreans in chains anyway when transporting them to the airport to depart the country, according to Cuck and media reports, i.e. pictures of those chains that we actually saw, and in which they remained for several days, as it turns out. U.S. immigration policy can influence business decisions, can it? The ICE raid in Georgia is going to have a massive economic impact, said Cook. Other attorneys and I are hearing from companies in Asia and Europe who say maybe we should hold off on big investments in the U.S. for at least, let's say 3 years. It actually says that. It doesn't say, at least. It just says hold off on big investments in the U.S. for at least 3 years. And one can understand immediately from what happened why they might do that. I really feel like we need to see more reporting now, doubling back and trying to figure out what did the weirdo Karen tell ICE when she called to make the report. Was she complaining about Koreans or not? Somebody's going to have to answer this. Well, it was a normal time somebody would have to answer for all of this. But instead, Stephen Miller will be asked about it, and he will go out and say Democrats need to be executed as a result of this. I don't know why, but he'll make up a reason. Another story to revisit, and I should be looking for this one in the Australian news. But I mentioned to you briefly, we had audio, but it was horrible because it was happening over, airline or aircraft noise. But yesterday's rather amazing tape of, I guess from the day before, of an Australian reporter asking Trump a question about the propriety of his continued involvement in business affairs for the Trump organization. And he, denied it. Oh, my kids are running the business. But he went on then, of course, to say, you're a very nasty person, blah, blah, blah. What was it? He said, your leader, take me to your leader. Your leader is coming to see me in a few days. And I'm going to tell him about you. You're a very nasty person. You're from Australia. So now he's proposing, of course, collective punishment for Australia. I think somebody mentioned something about it being, 28 million in population. I don't know what the population of Australia is offhand, but that's stuck in my mind. We can look it up. I'll do it as I'm looking for the other things. But collective punishment for all of Australia because a reporter from Australia asked a pretty normal question. What about the propriety of your continued involvement in business affairs? Well, he lied that he wasn't, but it was a good question, but not even particularly nasty form of it. But who are you again? Where are you from? And by the way, an amazing admission there too. I'm going to hold your country responsible for you asking a reasonable question. So, one, I wanted to look and see whether, and by the way, Trump is out of the country at the moment. He's gone to UK for his second state visit there. We'll see whether he finally gets the golden carriage or not. But I wanted to see whether Australian ABC Trump finance, or Trump business, I guess we'll say. Whether I'm curious, did that reporter file a story or not? How are they covering things there? And now here's the ABC story on the exchange between him and the reporter. Just says, in short, Trump has responded to a question from the ABC by telling the journalist he's hurting Australia and suggesting it will damage relations with the U.S. Is there more to? What I was trying to get at was, what story was he chasing? Because I think I have the answer to that, and it's been sitting in Instapaper, and I haven't gotten to it yet. It's a long read, so we're not going to get all the way through it. But here's a report from ABC News. Donald Trump has criticized the ABC's America's editor during an extraordinary exchange at the White House, telling him, "You're hurting Australia," when he will tell Prime Minister Anthony Albanese about it. Does he say Albanese or Albanese? I don't know. Washington-based journalist John Lyons had asked the U.S. president several questions about his business dealings, including, is it appropriate, President Trump, that a president in office should be engaged in so much business activity? Well, I'm really not, said Trump. My kids are running the business. You know what the activity... Where are you from? When Lyons told Mr. Trump he was from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Mr. Trump replied, oh, the Australian... You're hurting Australia. So basically, that. By the way, he did what I do with that. Is the Australian Broadcasting, is it company or corporation? I don't know. Neither does he. So I'm from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, sir. Oh, the Australian, I forgot already. You're hurting Australia. In my opinion, you're hurting Australia very much right now, and they want to get along with me. When Lyons attempted to ask a follow-up question, Mr. Trump told him, quiet. Mr. Albanese, we'll say, is set to travel to New York for the UN General Assembly next week. Not specifically to talk to Trump, but I'm sure he'll do it while he's there. And has indicated he hopes to meet Mr. Trump while in the U.S. He shouldn't. He and Mr. Trump have not met since their respective election wins, though Mr. Trump's comments suggest a meeting is planned. It probably isn't, but now it is. The ABC has sought clarification from the White House and the Prime Minister's office. Ask them both, because one's going to lie to you. The Trump administration later continued the criticism online, using an official White House account to label Lyons a, quote, foreign fake news loser. That's an official post, alongside a Fox News clip from the press conference. The office of California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom also tweeted the clip and wrote, why is Donald Trump threatening journalists? Our allies deserve respect, not intimidation. Earlier in the exchange, Lyons had asked Mr. Trump how much wealthier he was now than when he returned to the White House. Mr. Trump responded, well, I don't know what the deal, if the deals I made, for the most part, other than what my kids are doing, you know, I just remembered I'm not supposed to be saying that. They're running my businesses, but most of the deals that I've made were made before. Then he spoke about a new ballroom, of course, planned for the White House, his usual pivot, which he said he would pay for personally. I doubt that very much. That'll be PAC money, I'm sure. Lyons' questions were part of an investigation by the ABC's Four Corners program into Mr. Trump's business activity since his return to the presidency. Several U.S. media organizations have found Mr. Trump's wealth has significantly increased during his time in office. Last week, business publication Forbes published its annual list of the richest people, America's richest people, which estimated Mr. Trump's wealth had grown from $4.3 billion US dollars to $7.3 billion in a year. ABC News director Justin Stevens said Lyons had the broadcaster's full support. Lyons is a highly awarded journalist, and one of the most experienced and respected reporters in Australia, Mr. Stevens said. His job is to ask questions. What about the meeting? Is that going to happen? The Australian government has been trying to lock in a bilateral meeting between Mr. Albanese and Mr. Trump for months. He's traveled to Canada for a scheduled meeting in June, but the meeting was canceled when Trump returned to the U.S. earlier than planned as hostilities flared between Israel and Iran. And At that time, Mr. Albanese said he wanted to discuss U.S. tariffs on Australian products and the AUKUS. So is that, what are we talking about? Australia, UK, US security partnership, which is now being reviewed by the Pentagon. The U.S. says the review is designed to ensure the Australia-UK-US pact aligns with Mr. Trump's America First agenda. And it doesn't, because it's called the Australia-UK-US. In this case, America's last. Can't you see? The two leaders have spoken on the phone 4 times since Mr. Trump's reelection, according to the Prime Minister. And Trump probably ate lunch in the middle of those. Earlier this month, Mr. Albanese said the pair had a warm and constructive conversation about trade and economic growth, critical minerals, and the two nations' shared security interests. Trump later briefly responded to a question about the call by describing Mr. Albanese as a good man. Last month, Deputy Prime Minister and Defense Minister Richard Marles, Marles, not sure of the pronunciation, visited Washington, that's the new pronunciation, to meet U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who has been publicly pressuring Australia to significantly lift defense spending. After they met, the U.S. Department of Defense responded to journalists' questions with an emailed statement attributed to an unnamed official that said, "We can confirm there was not a meeting. It was a happenstance encounter at the bar, I'm sure. That's where you meet Australians." The opposition and the Greens both said the U.S. was treating Australia with contempt. But the Pentagon's chief spokesman, Sean Parnell, later followed up with a more positive statement saying Mr. Hegseth welcomed the opportunity to meet Mr. Marles, and their meeting was coordinated in advance. Oh, we're lying now. We can't even get the story straight. Did you plan to meet with this high-ranking Australian official? No, he was in the bathroom. He was stalking me. That's how contemptuous the relationship is at this point. I didn't even plan to meet with that guy. Weird thing to do. So anyway, I mentioned to you, and they mentioned in the story, that yes, there is a long form story out there that I should at least acknowledge. I probably shouldn't start reading it now because it is very long. Although, you know what? As it turns out, it's not even the Forbes story I was thinking of. It was a New York Times long form story that I've got here. But let me go and roll back in this thing and click on their mention of a Forbes. Oh, that was the Forbes richest Americans list. I got you. Well, I was wondering whether their reporting or the questioning was driven by something else, although that probably could have prompted it all by itself. I mean, that's a rather dramatic growth in personal wealth, $4 billion to $7 billion in a year, while president. And Trump gives away the game. The deals I made. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't make those deals. My kids made those. The ones that I made before I was president. I didn't do that now, even though he's Trump coining like crazy right in the middle of everything and everybody can see it. All right. But I mentioned to you that there was a long form story out there. The story is this. It's listed as a 20-minute read. No chance I could get through that in less than an hour. But it is Anatomy of Two Giant Deals. What are these two giant deals? The UAE, oh boy, got chips. Computer chips, AI power stuff. And the Trump team got crypto riches. What happened? We're not supposed to give you these chips, but if you buy enough Trump coin, basically, I think is what underlies all this, a lucrative transaction involving the Trump family's cryptocurrency firm and an agreement giving the Emiratis access to AI chips were connected in ways that have not been previously reported. I know we all hate the New York Times, but there it is. Eric Lipton, David Balani, pronunciations these days. You're driving me crazy, people. Bradley Hope, that seems easy. Trip Mickle, which sounds like a fake name. Sorry, Trip, but I like it. And Paul Moser are the reporters reporting from distant locations like Washington, not very distant, New York, London, Dubai, San Francisco, and Taiwan. What's going on here? No chance to get the full impact of it across, but let's name some names. This summer, here's the name: Steve Witkoff, President Trump's Middle East envoy, plus a couple other things, paid a visit to the coast of Sardinia. Hey, so did my dad. A stretch of the Mediterranean Sea crowded with super yachts. Not how my dad went, I don't believe, but it's a very nice place. On one of those extravagant vessels, I wonder if he saw it from the coastline, Mr. Witkoff sat down with a member of the ultra-rich ruling family of the United Arab Emirates. Also not my dad, but, Anyway, he was meeting Sheikh Tahnoun bin Zayed Al Nahyan, a trim figure in dark glasses who controls $1.5 trillion of the Emiratis' sovereign wealth. And sovereign wealth funds is something that deeply interests Donald Trump, of course. Anyway, it was the latest engagement in a consequential alliance. Over the past few months, Mr. Witkoff and Sheikh Tahnoun had become both diplomatic allies and, this is where the problem arises, and business partners, testing the limits of ethics rules while enriching the president, his family, and his inner circle. Why aren't all my musics playing? I don't know. We're going to have to hit a couple of buttons and see whether we can make things work here. Go, everybody. There we are. Jeez, I'm sorry. Apologies there to Justice Putnam, whose program is supposed to come up next. We're going to get out of the way, but we're going to play this full music bit just to smooth our transition, I suppose. So, yes, over the past few months, Mr. Witkoff and the Sheikh have become both diplomatic allies, as is required by their jobs, and business partners, which is required by their love of money, testing the limits of ethics rules while enriching the president, his family, and his inner circle. According to, this investigation by the New York Times. At the heart of their relationship are two multi-billion-dollar deals. One involved a crypto company, and you know all about Trump and his Trump coin and his crypto company, but did you remember that the company was founded by a partnership between both the Trump family and Witkoff? And the other deal involved a sale of valuable computer chips that benefited the Emirates economically. While there is no evidence that one deal was explicitly offered in return for the other, the confluence of the two agreements is itself extraordinary. Taken together, they blurred the lines, one might say, between personal and government business and raised questions about whether U.S. interests were served. At all, anywhere, at any point during any of this dealing. U.S. interests, what are they? Mine, I guess.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, long past time for you to stop listening to me and start listening to Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which comes up next right here on Netroots Radio. What's up? Top line, Democrats finally go on the offense and call out MAGA Congress members and witnesses at an important hearing. Which important hearing? Let's let Justice update you on that one, and we'll see you tomorrow.